in the UI portal. We immediately spoke to the individual who reported this incident, and according to the report, they could view identity verification documents that had been uploaded by other UI claimants. Working with the Commonwealth Office of Technology, our Technology Services Office prevented any further incidents by taking the UI portal down completely at 11:30 a.m. By noon, we had a temporary solution that prevented all unemployment claimants from viewing any identification documents. By midnight that night, the security team that had been established had created a software patch to resolve the issue. It's important to note that April 23rd is the only date that this was ever reported to us. We have not received any reports of it since. And so, from all indications, the patch that was created that evening was successful. It's also important to notice that there were 2 verifiable reports that this happened. And it happened only with UI claimants. There are no indications that the UI system was infiltrated from the outside, that this was only a situation that could be potentially viewed by other UI claimants. It's also important to know that not everyone who logged into the UI system that day would have had this experience. It's only for individuals who had navigated through their account summary to view UI identity documents. And so we feel like there's a very limited number of individuals who could have experienced this, but with that initial verified report, we acted to take the system down as soon as the incident was verified, and the individual who reported it explained to us what they saw. So the precautions that have been taken since then, again, there has been no indication that there has been any additional incidents like this that have occurred since that day in April, and nothing to indicate that there was an external infiltration of the system. Since then, there's been an ongoing technology investigation just to make sure that our systems are secure, especially as we've seen reports across the country of more significant data breaches that have happened that have been external in nature. Again, we take this very seriously. I think it's important to know for those who did file a claim for unemployment insurance that this revealing of data could have only happened to the individuals who had uploaded identity documents, and that would have been prior to April 23rd. Identity documents move through our system, so they're not always all there at the same time. Once they're verified, they're processed, and they're moved on. So it's a limited number of UI claimants that even could have had their identity been accessible. So we have notified the major credit reporting agencies that this has happened, and we will be sending direct information to those who may have experienced this data breach. We'll be sending information to them directly with instructions on checking their credit report, on reporting potential identity theft. This is obviously something that IT systems are susceptible to. It's nothing that we take lightly, and we continue to monitor the security of the system at a high priority on a daily basis. Thank you, Governor.
I want to thank Josh and his staff for how quickly internally they reacted to this. But I do want you to know that I'm not satisfied by the response. That while there is no indication that anyone has been or will be financially harmed, I do believe it took way too long to provide public notice. This was back in April. And so I've asked the Inspector General from another cabinet to create independence, the Transportation Cabinet, who served in the Attorney General's office ultimately over the reporting of all data breaches, to take a look at this, to ensure that our software is where it needs to be, and to review the practices and procedures. I want to make sure that we respond quickly, and we respond correctly each and every time. And I'm excited about those 15,000 claims, but I know people out there are suffering, and I know that we haven't reached everybody that we need to. So I'm also announcing tonight that I'm going to make some changes to make sure that we see some different results moving into the future. Specifically, I'm going to be reorganizing our cabinets and moving the unemployment insurance group to the labor cabinet where it used to be. There are more resources and folks that are trained on the outside that can come in and help. It'll give us an opportunity to have some additional leadership that can come in and help direct us to where we need to go. It's important that people out there know that we are taking action, that we don't take anybody's delay lightly, and that we are going to make sure that we get our work done. Your claim is important to me. If you are suffering because we haven't processed it fast enough, I want to take steps to make sure that we can. All right, finally, in an unrelated to COVID announcement, but as we move out of this important, we're making some investments in infrastructure all across Kentucky, with more than $5 million in grants going to Kentucky cities and counties. Hart County is going to be receiving $1.5 million of community development block grant for their wastewater treatment facility. City of Lancaster is going to receive $1 million to improve their sanitary sewer system. Perry County is going to get $1.169 million in conjunction with another $604,000 for the Vico wastewater treatment plant. The City of Edmonton is going to receive $500,000 paired with another $4.5 million in local funds for their water storage and distribution system. Estill County is going to currently loses 39% of all water produced at their treatment facility plant. A project we're working on will provide clean, more efficient water to 215 businesses and 3,600 households. And then in Manchester, there's a $126,000 ARC grant to help the Goose Creek sewer line, which is exposed and at risk of damage, so that it can provide safe, reliable sewer to 25 businesses and 150 households. As we are reopening, we know that infrastructure is absolutely critical to making sure that we can create the jobs and help our communities thrive. We are not stopping the other jobs that we have to do during this crisis. We're going to make sure that we're continuing to pay attention to our local communities. All right, so with that, we will open up, and I'll go over. We'll make sure we take at least 15 minutes of questions to our reporters, Karen Czar, Phil Pendleton, Stu Johnson, Lawrence Smith, Mike Valenti, Joe Ragusa, and Joe Sonka. And today we'll start over with Karen.
I just want to make sure I'm clear in reporting this. If you
Sorry?
were affected by the breach, you will get an email that says everyone is fine on it.
All right.
Double check.
So,
If you pinpoint everyone who was affected.
so we do not know yet, and we don't believe yet, that anybody's data has been used to harm them. And so what you do in these data breaches is you try to figure out anybody whose data could have potentially been seen, and then you advise that group. And I know they're working on that right now. The amount of people that will get the notice will be much larger. And I believe right now it's all based on just a handful of reports of individuals who were on there for legitimate reasons to file their claims that were able to see sensitive documents from other people. We don't have one report of an external group seeing it or a con artist using it. We want to make sure people know, and then we have full disclosure to each and every one of them.
Don't email, then you're okay.
If you don't get an email or a letter then your documents weren't on the system at that time. But if you do get one, know that right now it's out of an abundance of caution, but you deserve to know. And it's like all the other ones that you get, each and every day. I get them from Yahoo because I still have a Yahoo email. But that's unfortunately, and it's not an excuse, but this is part of our new technology society. Lawrence. Mm-hmm. Okay, the circumstances that Kentucky Kingdom will be able to reopen is based on their 300-plus page sets of guidelines, along with a few new ones, I think hand sanitizer stations, and then a phased reopening where I think they're going to do half the park in the beginning. But it's based on what they provided with Dr. Stack's input, and then a very strict set of guidelines. In many ways, it's very similar to what Churchill provided to us that allowed us to move forward there. So that proposal is an open record. If you haven't already seen it, we can provide it to you. Stu.
With the state parks this summer, you stressed about wanting people to stay in the state. Is there any concern that you could have too many people in a lodge, too many people trying to do check out? Is there too many people sending on the lodges?
That's a good question. It's about our parks opening and lodges, and are we concerned we have too many people? We're going to monitor that very carefully. We're going to look at our bookings. We're going to make sure that we don't have the density that's there, and then we're going to police social distancing. In our state parks, knowing with our state workers that we can do the right types of training and that we're exhibiting all of the best behaviors. I have a lot of confidence that our state parks can do this the right way, and my goal is for them to be a model for other people on how to do it. But it's going to be important that we promote that when you see something wrong, you got to speak up. Because if you don't, that virus could be spreading and spreading and spreading and spreading. I was missing some of these questions from a WHAS viewer. Can someone ask the governor what he plans to do for the mass evictions that are going to start happening on June 1st? This is some misinformation that's been out there. My order preventing evictions does not expire on June the 1st. It will continue. If we need to clarify that in writing, we'll clarify that in writing. This virus is still out there. We're going to make sure that order does not stop. Any thoughts yet on the plan submitted by the Kentucky State Fair Board? I haven't seen it yet. I think it came in today. Representatives from the Attorney General's Office are appearing for the General Assembly's Interim Joint Judiciary Committee next week on the topic of executive powers under KRS Chapter 39A. Those are the governor's powers during an emergency. Has the governor's office also been invited? No, we haven't. No, we haven't. To comment on the governor's powers during an emergency. And if it's that the Attorney General is the chief legal advisor, I was in that role for 4 years. I have respect for our current Attorney General. He's done it for about 4 months. I would hope that we don't simply choose who comments on those powers based on party, but we actually want to have a real discussion on it. So the second part, I can tell you with certainty, is that the reason is because the cabinet did not believe it qualified as a data breach under the law. I do. And so I learned about this based on an email between the cabinet and the Attorney General's office late last week. And I believe that we've got to identify when something is a breach, and we've got to do it correctly. And I wasn't going to let the fact that it happened over a month ago stop us from doing the right thing now. Now, there may be legitimate debate about whether it falls under the statute, but because I believed it did, we made sure that we did it now. On delays, no. We don't believe that caused any delay, that updating a system or changing a system couldn't otherwise cause. And I will say that the Education Cabinet fixed it very quickly. I have no criticisms of the immediate response, just about whether it qualified as a data breach and when the notice was made to the public. But this has been my promise. All right, my promise has been to be transparent and honest and tell you when I think we screwed up. Joe.
So we still hear from people who say they've waited a long time in their claims, they're on hold for hours and hours. What is the status of how many unemployment claims are open? What the backlog is right now? Whether that's a pure number or percentage.
Okay. And do you want to know it by month or? Okay.
So for March, the backlog is, as of today, just over 10,000 that are still being reviewed for determination. And then for April, it is right around 30,000 that are still waiting on a determination. And essentially, it's either they're waiting to be reviewed just because of the volume that have to be handled manually, or there's a lot of back and forth that have to go on with some of these claims, whether it's with an employer or the individual to verify information. But 10,000 in March, 30 remaining in April.
And I think it's important to note, and while I have talked and repeatedly talked about how we need to get through these faster, that there's a lot of federal law and a lot of hurdles with these. It's not as simple as you file something and you qualify. Federal law makes us take a number of steps, and what we're starting to see in the federal government is them saying, wait, you guys are doing this too fast. And so I want to flag to you all that I think I see the narrative out of Washington changing very quickly from how long it's taking, which we're talking about, which is what I'm concerned about for people, to how quickly states like Kentucky are doing it. But you know, if the federal government wants to start saying we're doing it too quickly, we're trying to help people. And we're trying to be there for Kentuckians. Phil? All right, the question's on the Kentucky High School Athletic Association, which commented on our youth sports plan. We provided it to them. They made some suggestions. We incorporated those. And I think we're thinking all along the same lines. They're looking through different sports, some of them easier to get to competition than others. You look at a very low-touch sport like tennis with an ability to get to competition. You know, one interesting thing is a lot of the lower-touch sports are spring sports. Right, and we're coming into the fall at a time where we have this virus, so I know they're thinking through those as well. What I hope is that people are willing to be flexible, that we don't just think that we have to have a sport in a certain month, especially look at what's happening on the pros, simply because we've always had it in that month. And even with a major sport, if it would be safer to move potentially from the fall to the spring or think about different ways to do it, I hope we're open to it. That gives the best chance for those student athletes to have the chance to play. If we start a high-touch sport too soon, and I don't know what too soon will be. I mean, we're right now seeing the numbers move really well, and we'll know a whole lot more before June 15th. But if we start seeing a spike again, you'd hate to see somebody start a season, play a game or two, and then have to pause it. So I hope that we're smart and we're flexible as we move forward. I believe the KHSAA has been very thoughtful in their approach. They've been communicating well with us. All right, this is from WCHS ABC 8. As a governor in the coronavirus world, how are you now interacting with the public? Are you shaking hands? If someone wants a picture, do you take it with them? This has been a strange time for everybody, and everybody's profession has changed, and a whole lot of my profession is about being, or used to be about being in the public, shaking hands, visiting communities, sitting down and talking to people face to face and one-on-one. And that hadn't been possible since this. I haven't taken a political trip anywhere since early March. Haven't gotten on the state plane for any reason since that early March time. and have been right here, communicating with the public this way, over the phone and through Zoom. I've tried to model my behavior in the way that I'm asking everybody else to, and not have exceptions just for me. So any of those conspiracy folks that are out there that want to say, I'm flying a state plane to Florida, things like that, here again, you're just supporting these extremists. You're just revving up the anger. We ought to be better than this, and to be doing it after we've seen what certain people will do when you stir that pot is pretty sad.
But on some of the turmoil that we're seeing in different cities around the country, we've seen it with the Ahmaud Arbery case in Brunswick, Georgia. Then we just saw with the George Floyd case in Minneapolis, of just kind of these unspeakable acts that we're seeing. And if you have friends in the Black community like I do, they'll just say, Mayor, this is what we've been enduring for a long time. So it's white America has started to see more and more of this, going back to Ferguson, Missouri, and Michael Brown, and it's going on in the litany of these activities since then. Obviously, in our city, the Breonna Taylor tragedy has surfaced issues that none of us wish had visited our city, but they have. And so our job is to appreciate and understand Breonna was a Louisvillian. She was a daughter. She was an EMT. So what's often gets lost in so many of these cases is the humanity behind the person that all of the activity is taking around. So I always like to start our conversations with that. And I'm a dad with 4 adult children, and I can only imagine how I would feel if one of my adult children was gone in a tragedy like this. So whether it's your child, whether it's your aunt, your sister, whomever, I think we all gotta say, regardless of whatever anybody's opinions are about anything, everybody's loved by somebody, and we want to honor those lives as they're gone. So as everybody knows, we've been working around this issue intently for the last several weeks. The incident started on March the 13th. So today's session is to talk all about that and take questions from the community. Kendall Boyd is our Chief Equity Officer for the city. He's going to be our moderator for tonight. Louisville is one of the first cities in the country to create an office for equity. What that means for us is that all of our decisions are made through an equity lens. And what that means is that equity is different than equal, right? Equal is the same amount for everybody. When you take a look at the needs of our community and how many parts of our community have been historically underinvested in. When I say historically, I'm going back 4 centuries. Then it's not right today to say, well, everything just needs to be the same for everybody. No, the purpose of the American dream that we can never give up on is that everybody has access to the resources that are required for them to realize their dreams. And so that means that equity is more important than ever. And we also cannot turn away from the racial lens that's involved in these cases. And we cannot be blind to this history of racial or power imbalance between law enforcement and communities of color. And while these individual tragedies visit different cities, Brunswick, Minneapolis, New York, Louisville, Ferguson, goes on, they are all part of a book, let's say, of this type of history of our country. And so we want to talk about one of the chapters in those books today, and that's Louisville, Kentucky, and Breonna Taylor, and what we need to do as a community to say, Breonna's gone, we can't change that. What have we learned? What are we changing? I'll talk about that later in the broadcast in terms of what Metro is doing. And what more can we be doing as well? But I also think a big part of this process is hearing from the community, the pain from the community, the emotions from our community that are extraordinarily important to process. And it's not something where you just flip a switch and say, okay, I processed that, I'm done. These events, like Breonna's case, or Mr. Floyd's case, are re-traumatize the Black community in most of America. Which the question is just like, how much more of this can we take? And this is a question I think that white America needs not just to have empathy to, but need to come into common cause to address the underlying symptoms, the underlying structures, and change those so, in fact, America really is a country that holds promise of equality and justice and opportunity for everybody. This is hard work. I know our community's got the right stuff to do it. I'm not going to paper over it and act like it's easy, or one speech is going to handle it, or one Facebook town hall is going to handle it. But I do believe that we have the opportunity here in our great city of Louisville to be a model for what's possible in the country, because we're not starting this work around racial discrimination. We lean into Louisville's been dealing with that for a couple of years now. We're not starting on police community legitimacy. We've been working on that proactively with the Synergy project. So we've got a community that's worked on a lot of these issues. We got to take this tragedy, make our city better, and make our country better in the result. That's my prayer. So let's kick off today's session. Kendall, I'll throw it over to you to moderate us, and we welcome all types of input from the community throughout this, please. Okay, thank you. Kendall Boyd, Chief Equity Officer for the City of Louisville.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, my name is Kendall Boyd. I'm the Chief Equity Officer for Louisville Metro Government. I appreciate the opportunity to have this dialogue with our community. I want to introduce our guests. Of course, we have Mayor Greg Fisher. We have Major Paul Humphrey. We have our Chief of Safety, Ms. Amy Hess. We have Ms. Haley Brent of our Youth Implementation Team. And we also have Dr. Eric Johnson of the Galilee Baptist Church, who's going to provide us some clergy input. Ladies and gentlemen of Louisville, I know we're hurting. This is a bad situation. This is an ugly situation, and we feel the pain. And so I wanted us to have this dialogue today to be able to clear up some misconceptions we may have, and to have this dialogue with one another. I get it. We're anxious. We're angry. On top of that, we're dealing with a pandemic that we've never seen before. So this is our opportunity to talk to each other and set a course of action moving forward in this situation. So, Mayor, I want to kick it off with you, because this is a lot of what I've heard in the community. Why haven't we released the 911 tapes? They've been released today. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about the 911 tapes and their release just a couple of hours ago.
Okay, can I start at the beginning and end up with the question? Okay. Yeah, so a lot of folks, have been saying, why are we just talking about this issue now? The incident happened on March the 13th, and as is our practice with officer-involved shootings, we held a press conference the day of the tragedy. And typically what we do with that is show the body camera evidence that transpires in a case like this. There was no body camera in this particular episode. That's one of the issues that we've changed as a result of this undercover narcotics team executing the warrant. And so we were public about that. And then the coronavirus came. The public integrity units that are involved with each and every one of these officer-involved shootings was initiated on March 13th. They typically take 2 to 4 months to complete. We're about 2 months into this case when it started becoming much more visible to Louisville and the nation. And it was the connection with the Ahmaud Arbery case, Breonna's case. Breonna's family, throughout the time since we lost her, was trying to get more attention to this case. And that attention came. And then many people in our city said, hey, what's going on with this case? And that's really when this dialogue has started now for the last probably 2.5 weeks or so in the community. And obviously we welcome the dialogue, and by nature, these PIU investigations are private until they're completed. Then they go to the Commonwealth attorney, and then at some point the facts become public once the attorney general in this case decides what's going to move forward with the case. So we have already made several changes as a result of this, and I'm sure we will be making more. But among those will be a change in no-knock warrants. That was an issue that's been central to this case, where no-knock warrants allow you to enter a facility without knocking, and the purpose of those warrants, they have to be signed off by a judge, as was the case with this warrant, is because there's concern about evidence being destroyed or a threat to the police officers. There was misreporting that the police did not announce themselves. Mr. Walker has said, no, the police did announce themselves. He says he did not hear them identify themselves as the police, and that's what's kind of at the center of so much of the problem that's come out of this thing. But in any event, the change in no-knock warrants is now that the chief of police has to sign off on this warrant before it goes to a judge. The issue of the narcotics officers being undercover agents, that's why they didn't have body cameras. That's not acceptable when warrants are going to be executed in the future. And so a change has been made to that, where undercover officers have to have body cameras when a search warrant is being executed. Third is the whole issue of, is there adequate oversight from the community with the police department? Our existing commission on that is not as strong as what it can be. We are preempted from some issues by the state. Tomorrow, we're kicking off the independent civilian police review process that will be looking at what are the best practices around the country. They'll be recommending a new practice or practices to the Metro Council, who then has to put together legislation that they can pass, and that obviously complies with the existing laws that we have. So that first meeting of that is tomorrow. Last week, as promised, the case file was turned over to the FBI, the U.S. Attorney, and the Attorney General here in Kentucky, because it's important that the community sees that there's multiple eyes on this investigation by PIU, so that when the facts come out, that they'll say 3 different agencies or 4 different agencies looked at these, and as best possible, they are the facts as we know them. Fifth, last week, Chief Conrad announced his retirement, so there'll be a leadership change at LMPD. We will be shortly announcing what that process will be looking like. It will be a national search, and the community, I will ask the community to be involved with this search process as well. Concurrent with that announcement, we announced that we're creating a cabinet for public safety that will be overseen by Amy Hess. Amy, when she retired from the FBI, was the highest ranking officer in the FBI nationally. She came home to Louisville and has been working with Metro government for the last 6 months. So police, fire, corrections, and emergency management will be reporting into Chief Hess, and she will provide an additional set of eyes over the police department. Seventh was we released all the 911 calls today. We had a subpoena that we needed to be responding to. I was only asking for one specific call. I said, go ahead, let's release all of the information that we have relative to 911 so we can provide more context in the case. Some of those calls are tough to listen to as well. You can feel the panic and the emotion that takes place when bullets start flying. So I guess that just kind of leads us to where we're at today, right? It's moving forward, and I'll wrap it up here, is, you know, we've got to lean into our existing initiatives that we've had or make them better. Most cities, when they go through a tragedy like this, they announce, let's say, a commission on racism, or they announce a police community legitimacy task force. I just want to remind our city that these are things we've been working on proactively without a case like this precipitating this event. Lead into Louisville for 2 years, the Synergy Project for 6 years. So we want the community to take the passion of this moment and exercise that when we're trying to build the muscle around police community legitimacy and trust each and every day. So we need your help in that area to the community. And if our existing processes aren't getting it done, then we need your help in figuring out what to get it done. Because at the end of the day, we're in this together. It's like we're a community as a family. You go through low lows, you go through high highs. You might be really angry at each other, but at the end of the day, you're still family. So you got to figure out how to work through that. And I think that's where we're at, and that's our opportunity as a community here, not to put rose-colored glasses on, but this is hard work no matter where you go. And we show the rest of the country how to do it. Work through the anger, work through the pain. It's all justifiable. Be a better city. Take racism head on, change underlying structures, and do the road work, as Muhammad Ali would say.
Thank you, Mayor. And you brought up a whole bunch of key points in your talk, and I'll allow Chief Hess to also weigh in. One of the questions we're getting from the public is, why haven't the officers been fired, and why haven't they been charged with murder? That's what the public wants to know.
So I'll talk to the process a little bit, and Chief Hess, if you want to come in on that. So the way the steps work is you have the Public Integrity Unit complete their investigation. The community was saying, hey, that's not right for the police to investigate themselves. That's when I said, well, we'll ask the FBI, the Attorney General, and U.S. Attorney to look at this as well. They will look at the case. They may ask, it will not be unusual for them to ask for more information. And then the Attorney General will then be making determination on will charges be filed, what kind of charges will be filed. So there's due process associated with this. There's also contractual rights that the police officers have with the union contract that has been negotiated over the years as well. So this process of due process is working out right now. And I know people are impatient for it, but the important thing is that we might not agree on what the outcome is, whatever it might be, but we should all agree on getting the facts the best we can so that justice can be served. And that's been my priority in the whole thing is let's get to truth, let's get to justice, and then go from there.
Chief Hess, did you want to weigh in?
Sure. Thanks, Kendall. And thank you, Mayor. And thanks to all of you for allowing us this opportunity to engage this evening on this very important topic. I will say that even though I am new to Metro government, I actually been here about 4 months. I know it seems like 6 months, but 4 months. And I am learning a lot about local government, but I will say that what I hope I bring to the equation is my experience with the federal government, particularly with the FBI. And the FBI routinely investigates actions that are committed, we call it under the color of law. And what that means is law enforcement officers who have conducted some type of activity or some type of event under their authority as a law enforcement officer. And this is a very common thing in the FBI to conduct these type of color of law investigations. They're classified under our civil rights program to identify whether or not civil rights have been violated. And there are certainly federal laws that govern that process and protocols and procedures. And as we go through that process, much like the mayor described, it may take some time to identify whether or not those laws have been violated. And even if they haven't, then we are working closely with the local and state governments to say, hey, this might not rise to the level of a federal violation. However, it may be something that a local or a state law may be able to address. And so as we go through that process, I think it's also just important to say that while it seems like that is in action, there's a lot happening under the surface of the water that is part of the investigative process. And as far as HR is concerned, HR type of processes, I don't know if Kendall, you wanted to address any of that and how that works here in local government.
You mean with respect to firing of police officers or terminating police officers? Yes, I mean, we're guided by state law under 67C that provides specific due process rights for officers who've been accused of wrongdoing or accused of misconduct and the chief's authority to terminate those officers. Again, it's a process under state law that we have to abide by. I know some of the questions I've received from the community is why can't the chief fire these officers like the officers were fired up in Minnesota with that situation. Minnesota law is different than Kentucky law. So there's some specifics there that we have to address to ensure due process for the police, because if it's done wrong, then those officers get their job back, they get back pay and things like that. So those are the things we have to be careful of to ensure justice for everybody, but we don't want to go out of step and miss a procedural issue that would allow someone who is guilty of wrongdoing to get their job back. So those are the sort of things that we have to look for when we're talking about termination of officers, which is separate than the criminal issue of charging an officer with a crime. Thank you, Chief Hess. I wanted to get to our other two guests. I know I see a whole lot of questions in our queue, but I wanted our other guests to be able to speak briefly. We have Ms. Haley Brentz on, and she's with our youth implementation team. And Haley, as we've seen since Ferguson, these social justice movements have a lot of energy from our youth. And I see you as one of those passionate youth voices to speak up when you see alleged wrongdoing. And so I wanted to ask you, what is the youth implementation team? What is your role in that? And how have they worked with the mayor at addressing these sort of social issues?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here. So the Youth Implementation Team is a youth advisory board for youth ages 14 to 24. We meet every other week throughout a school year's time. And basically, our main goal is to advise the mayor on different topics that are important to us surrounding youth violence prevention. Recently, we've had the opportunity to meet with Mayor Beshear as well as other important youth organizations like the Muhammad Ali Center Council of Students, as well as the Youth Violence Prevention Research Center. And so we've been able to discuss with all of those different people on our perspectives, our reactions, and our recommendations surrounding the Breonna Taylor murder. And so with the youth team, we're able to uplift youth voices and hear the perspectives of those around us in our community, because the policies and the changes that are happening, they affect us, and they affect us on the ground level. Because like you said, a lot of change happens when the youth are on the front lines. And so it's important that we put those voices that are being impacted the most at a seat at the table.
And a lot of what I've heard from our youth is, Kendall, we're tired of talking. We've been talking for 400 years. We want action. We want to see something done. We're tired of seeing bodies in the street. We're tired of seeing no accountability when someone kills an unarmed African American. So from a youth perspective, or just from your perspective, period, what is it that you want to see happen?
Of course. So when we meet as a group, we often come first with just very raw perspectives and say, what are you feeling? What is your reaction to this incident? And so from those conversations, we've had multiple over the past couple of weeks. We were able to come up with a list of about 6 different recommendations. And we're aware of the fact that, we're not going to get everything that we want, but it's important for us to put our desires out there. And so a few things from those recommendations were, we want to ensure compensation for Kenneth Walker and the family of Breonna Taylor, as well as we'd like to see more change when it comes to no-knock warrants. We acknowledge the alternative when it comes to having the chief of police have to approve each warrant, but we'd like to see the obliteration of them. We're calling for the firing of all the officers involved with the Breonna Taylor murder, a change in rhetoric. So instead of just calling it an incident or a killing, we're calling for it to be called a murder, because that's what we believe that it is. We'd like to see more transparent information, and from our perspective, it's our job to hold City Council, to hold Mayor Beshear, to hold all of our politicians and elected officials accountable for keeping that transparency. And then we'd also like to see a reallocation of funding from LMPD to things like restorative justice, violence prevention organizations, and initiatives. So we hold a unique position where we have the ear of the mayor, and we can take direct perspectives from youth on the street directly to the people that have the influence to make change. We also like to see in the future the opportunity for the youth team to have a seat in front of City Council and testify and give our perspectives. We have plans to put out a collective op-ed with the recommendations that I listed earlier, as well as just keeping the initiative between youth organizations on the LMPT Youth Board, as well as Civilian Police Accountability Board.
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Johnson just left for a moment. Oh, here he comes. Dr. Johnson, how are we doing this evening, sir? I think you're still on mute.
How are you guys doing, Kendall?
Doing well. I know that you've been active with respect to social justice issues in our community for a while, which is why I invited you to this talk. You've heard some of the questions that have been asked. You've heard some of the dialogue that's been discussed amongst the panel members here. I wanted to get your perspective on instances of social justice in community relations with LMPD and how we can avoid these sort of tragedies in the future. So I wanted to get your thoughts.
Great. That's a tremendous question, one to which I have been giving much thought. I would begin by suggesting I appreciate the mayor's leadership and your leadership in putting this time of conversation together, and that we could be transparent and just speak truth regardless of truth. First thing I would suggest, or I would suggest, is the idea and the understanding of community policing and transparency. I think it's one thing that the mayor has really tried to do that I commend him on, is he's really tried to be open. And he can only say and see from the place that he stands. And so he needs to be buttressed, if you will, be educated, to be shown kind of some metrics that are going on in our community that makes what I'm saying about community policing important. He